Hello and Happy New Year. I'm Dr. Kamani, licensed clinical psychologist. Thank you for tuning in. Today we will be continuing the conversation about Black women healing from toxic work environments. We had started talking about stages of grief and we will be continuing that conversation. I'll just be on for a few minutes today to talk about an additional stage of grief. As I mentioned before, sometimes it can feel surprising when we don't feel excited or happy when we decide to leave a toxic work environment, or we've already left the environment and we don't understand why we still don't feel jubilant. And many times that's because we have not recognized and addressed the grief that we have related to that toxic work environment. So the grief could be, as we start a job, we come in with a certain level of excitement. We come in with a certain vision in terms of what we expect to accomplish at that job. We may have certain friends or think that we have certain friends in that environment, but it turns out that they weren't really our friends, or it turns out that people we trusted may have betrayed us in some ways. So the job may have not turned out in the way that you wanted. And so you have that grief. Or you may have the grief in the sense of you may have made friends at your work environment and there's a sense of sadness that you won't be able to work with them every day. So the grief is there, and it's important for us to work through the grief so we can heal, so we're in a better position to then heal, okay, and move on and find more fulfilling work experiences. So I want to thank you for joining today. Welcome to my channel, Lifting as We Climb Consulting Wellness Services, where we focus on supporting individual and collective healing. Okay, how are we manifesting healing? So last time we've talked about, again, unpacking the different stages of grief. I have already talked about denial, anger, bargaining. Okay, so I'll just give a very brief overview of each, and to remind you that stages of grief are not linear. So we can go back and forth through the different stages. It just depends on your experiences, okay? So it may not look the same for everybody. So denial, in the sense of you may be at some level in denial about the depth of the toxicity in your work environment. So you may initially think it's, isolated to one, or come to realize that the whole system is toxic. So that's one level of denial. The other may be not being true to tuning into ourselves and recognizing the impact that the job may be having on our mental and physical and even spiritual well-being. So denial that it's taking a toll, that sense of, oh, I got this, nobody's going to run me out of here. But at the same time, not being truthful with ourselves that this job is really harming us in many ways. So denial. The next is anger. So anger in the sense of, angry that this is happening to us. We know that as Black women that we often feel uncomfortable acknowledging our anger because we're countering the stereotype of the angry Black woman. So we're very mindful of how we present to other people. But again, we have every right to feel anger when we've been harmed. Okay, so anger is the next. And then bargaining. So bargaining in the sense of you may be in a work environment where you're constantly having to prove your worth. And that can be very demeaning and demoralizing. And at some point you say to yourself, okay, I'm just going to go in and do my job. I'm not going to focus on anything else. But the thing is that many times we have been doing our jobs, and we have been doing our jobs at a very high standard. So that's where the mind trip up comes up, right? I can use another word, but I won't, right? So that's where the mind trip up comes in, because you think, I've been doing my job at a high level. Why is this happening to me? And at some point, sometimes you may start questioning yourself, and that sometimes leads to the stage of depression. So depression, you may think, with your job, that sense of disillusionment, that the job is not what you thought it was going to be, or that you've worked so hard to get here. You say, I worked so hard to get here. Like, it doesn't quite make sense, right? That you've worked so hard, you've sacrificed, you've done so many things, and you're in an environment that is very unfulfilling and many times is harmful to you. So that could be one part of the depression. The other part of the depression could be that you start beating up on yourself. You start questioning your own worth. Just like you're in the environment where you're constantly having to prove your worth, sometimes you can become angry with yourself, and that anger can turn inward and become depression. In that sense where you start questioning, do I have what it takes? Did I mess up? Maybe I should have done this. If they do that again, I'm going to do this, right? So you get in this pattern of really going down negative paths, right? So what I call those rabbit holes. So you go down a path of one negative thing and you just keep going further and further and further. Okay. So I want to be mindful also that when we talk about toxic job experiences, that we are also mindful of healing. Okay. I never want us to get to a point where we feel like that we are victims, that there's nothing that we can do about it, because trauma, the healing part of trauma is recognizing that we do have options. We do have choice, and that number one, we've been harmed and we need to get support first. Okay. So in terms of the healing tips that I want to offer for today, it's number one, let us continue to show ourselves loving kindness, particularly when we are in toxic work environments, that we need to be very kind to ourselves because we're already going through a trauma. It does us no benefit to constantly beat up on ourselves at the same time. The second thing is, please continue to support yourself around supportive individuals. Those individuals may recognize that you may really be struggling. Those individuals may recognize the signs of depression, such as sleeping too much, sleeping too little, overeating, not eating enough, social isolation. So that general sense of sadness, tearfulness. So those around you may be able to recognize those signs and may able to support you in getting the support that you need. If you start experiencing those symptoms that I just listed, and definitely if you're experiencing any symptoms related to having thoughts of hurting yourself and or hurting others, please immediately get help, okay? Don't think that that's something you can just brush under the rug. That is very serious. So you can either go to your nearest emergency room, call 911. There's also the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number that is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that's 1-800-273-8255. Again, that's 1-800-273-4255. And I want to say also that when you find yourself really struggling in certain environments, like you dread waking up, you feel like you're moving slow, right? You don't have that much energy, that, as you're working through the depression, part of what's helpful too is to really think about your exit plan. What is my plan to get out of this toxic environment? I know that I had a previous guest talk about she got a job transfer, right? So she stayed with the same employer, but got a job transfer. Some other individuals decide to completely leave that employer, maybe go to a different employer, same profession. Some individuals may want to leave the profession. Sometimes you may want to do things on your own. So there are so many different choices that I really want to emphasize so that we don't fall into those traps of feeling helpless and hopeless. We do have opportunities. So one of the opportunities that I want to share with you is that I have a few slots open for a job coaching program for Black women who are interested in leaving toxic work environments, because we need to get our minds right. We need to heal so that we're in the best position to be in a job, to be in a work environment that really fulfills us, that really nurtures our professional growth. So if you are interested in learning more about the job coaching program that I mentioned, please go to my website, liftingasweclimbconsulting.com, and there's a section that says job coaching. So click that and we can schedule a free 15-minute phone consultation. So my hope, in summary, is that you are beginning to become more aware of the stages of grief in relation to toxic work environments, and that it is so important for us to heal so that we then are able to pivot and move to a different environment. And because these experiences happen to us, This is nothing that we should be ashamed of. It's nothing in the sense that thinking that's only happens to you. It happens to many of us, unfortunately. Black women have very high rates of experiencing workplace bullying and toxic work environments, okay? But there is hope. Okay, so again, I hope that you remember the stages of grief we've talked about. If you would like to see the previous videos in which I break down the other stages of grief as opposed to just a summary, please check out the other videos on my YouTube channel. Again, Lifting As We Climb Consulting, Wellness Services. Future videos, I'll wrap up in terms of talking about the additional stage of grief, which is acceptance. So that's what I'll be talking about next Monday. Also, I'll be talking about, things, related to the top 10 signs that your toxic job is making you sick. Okay. So again, I want to thank you for joining. If you have not already subscribed to my channel, please do so. Lifting As We Climb Consulting, Wellness Services. And turn on the notifications so you receive notice on when I go on, okay? So I will be on Mondays having these conversations. As I mentioned before, I'm providing a platform for Black women to talk about their experiences because in so many ways, we've been taught either directly or through actions that we should be silent about our experiences. But we know that silencing is a form of oppression and we will not be silenced. We are standing up and saying this is unacceptable in terms of being disrespected in the workplace, okay? The other thing I want us to remember in terms of the takeaway is that we are not victims, we are victors, right? We are still standing. We're standing on the shoulders of our ancestors. We will survive. We will thrive, right? But we have to put ourselves in situations that are more healthy for us, okay? And then the last thing that, again, I want you to remember is that you do not deserve to be in a toxic workplace. You, me, we deserve so much better, okay? So again, I hope that you have a good rest of your day. Happy New Year again. And I look forward to seeing you next Monday as we talk about acceptance, okay? So have a good rest of your day.